My name is Sienna Harper, and they said I was selfish for wanting to sleep in my own bed, for needing silence in my own home, for asking to be seen. But what they really meant was, you were easier when you gave in. It started with one message: Blake needs a place to stay. I didn't know that meant my place. I had spent years building a home, late nights, ramen dinners, working through holidays, just to one day walk into my own condo and find it no longer belonged to me. They called it temporary, just like they always had. But this time I wasn't 10 years old. And this time I didn't argue. I documented, I observed, I planned. And when they looked up, the deed was signed. The walls were no longer theirs. The silence was finally mine. If you've ever been used by the people who claim they love you, if you've ever been told that your boundaries are betrayal, stay with me. Because this story isn't about revenge, it's about release. And the quiet, powerful moment when you stop asking to be respected and start acting like you already deserve it. Like, subscribe. And drop a comment if you've ever had to take your name back from the people who thought they owned it. The breeze from the lake curled around the edges of my balcony, cool and sharp against the late spring sun. Inside, music played low. Jazz, mellow but confident, just like I hoped I would be tonight. I arranged the champagne flutes in neat rows, lit the last of the vanilla sage candles, and gave the room one final scan. Everything was perfect. This was my night, my moment, a celebration of finally making partner. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I had earned every damn second of it. My phone buzzed. We're downstairs. I frowned. That was fast. I wasn't expecting them for another hour. A knock sounded before I could respond, then came the unmistakable clatter of keys, my keys, in the front door. It swung open. Blake stepped in first, dragging two suitcases behind him. One of the twins followed, clutching a battered plush unicorn. Then came the other two, all noisy sneakers and cracker crumbs. Mom floated in last, arms full of folded towels like she was on vacation, not barging into someone else's life. Wait, what? I managed. Oh, honey, these stairs. Mom sighed, already eyeing my hardwood floors like she'd designed them herself. We parked in the loading zone, so Blake had to move quickly. I hope your neighbors won't complain. My neighbors? My voice was paper thin. I told you Blake needed a place. Well, it's just for a few weeks, she said cheerfully, breezing past me to deposit her load in the hallway. His apartment's lease ended early, and with the divorce and everything, you understand. My eyes darted to Blake. He wasn't looking at me. His focus was on unzipping bags, instructing the kids on where not to touch things. Not once did he say thank you. Not even hello. But I have a party, yes, we know. Mom smiled. We'll stay out of your way. I turned toward the kitchen. The champagne flutes suddenly looked ridiculous. Dad entered last, carrying a box labeled Kitchen Blake, his face tight but silent as always. This is my home, I said quietly. Which is exactly why it's perfect, Mom chirped. Your place is spacious, close to the park for the kids, and you've always had a generous heart. That last part stung. I swallowed. I didn't agree to this. Mom stopped unpacking towels just long enough to offer me her most withering smile. We're not asking you to. It's family. We do what we must. Like when I was 10 and had to give up my room so Blake could move back home? I didn't mean to say it out loud. It just slipped. Her expression didn't flicker. That was different. You were a child. I almost laughed. Almost. The kids had already staked out the living room, their tiny hands leaving fingerprints on my cream couch. My neatly stacked books were now crooked, my coffee table adorned with half-eaten granola bars. I stood still, as if by not moving, I could undo this. Blake brushed past me toward the guest room. Which one's mine? I blinked. The one to the right, but... Perfect, he said, not waiting for the rest. I heard the door open and the thump of his duffel hitting the floor. Mom followed him in, then came back into the kitchen a moment later. She reached into her purse. Correction, my purse. And plucked out the spare key I thought I'd hidden well. She placed it gently on the counter. We've got it all sorted. And just like that, the conversation was over. The scent of my candle was now lost beneath the tang of someone's diaper bag. I looked around my condo, the one I bought after years of ramen dinners and overtime weekends. I had imagined this night so many times. People toasting to me, laughing in the golden light from the windows, me finally proud of what I'd built. Instead, there were cardboard boxes, crying toddlers, and the distant rumble of resentment. Mine, building like a storm behind my ribs. My phone buzzed again. A text from my colleague. Can't wait to celebrate you tonight. So proud. I didn't reply. I picked up a flute of champagne and held it lightly. I smiled awkwardly, but my hand still tightened around my glass. A few weeks? I've heard that before. They slept in my bed, ate my groceries, and left diapers all over the living room. But I'm the one who should apologize for complaining. At first, I thought I could handle it. A few nights on the couch, a couple of noisy mornings. It wasn't ideal, but I told myself it was temporary. That word again. Temporary. Like every time they'd taken from me, and every time I'd been told to smile and be gracious. But this time, I wasn't 10 years old. This was my home. By the third night, I hadn't slept more than 2 consecutive hours. The sofa cushions dug into my spine, and the constant hum of the white noise machine Blake insisted on using for the baby grated at my skull. I woke to the sound of cereal crunching, cartoons blasting, and sticky fingers pulling at my throw pillows. The guest room, which had once been my peaceful reading nook, now smelled like baby wipes and laundry detergent. My own bedroom was no longer mine. They'd claimed it entirely. My sheets replaced, my skincare products shuffled aside, a tiny sock hanging off the corner of my framed law degree like a joke. I powered up my laptop at the kitchen counter, earbuds in, trying to focus on a client meeting. Blake was somewhere in the back, shouting instructions. One of the twins cried, then screamed. My client, mid-sentence, paused and squinted. "Is everything okay on your end?" she asked, arching a perfect brow. I'm so sorry. There's family visiting. Just temporary. That word again. The baby wailed louder, and even with my mic muted, I knew she could hear it. I tried to keep talking, but I saw her glance sideways, clearly distracted. By the time the call ended, my inbox already had a message from my supervisor. Let's touch base later. Client mentioned background noise. Everything all right at home? My face burned. I looked around. Empty coffee mugs, crushed crackers underfoot, a pink pacifier bobbing in my glass of water. And somehow, I was the one being unprofessional. Later that afternoon, as I was scrubbing formula off my countertop, I got a text from Patricia, my downstairs neighbor. Patricia. Next time I'll call the building manager. This is getting out of hand. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath, opened my fridge, and realized the last of the fresh groceries I bought had vanished. Milk, gone. Eggs, gone. Even the oat milk creamer I'd hidden in the back corner. I couldn't even have a damn cup of coffee. And then came the final blow. Balloons, pink and purple, floating lazily near the ceiling, their ribbons caught in the blades of my ceiling fan. Surprise, Blake yelled as I stepped into my own living room. Lily's birthday. We thought we'd do something simple, just family. There were kids I didn't recognize, loud, sticky, jumping on my couch. My kitchen table, once set with elegant glassware, now sagged under a pile of grocery store cupcakes, plastic forks, and paper plates with cartoon bunnies on them. You did this here? I asked, stunned. It's just for a few hours, he said, like that excused the mess. Where else would we go? The baby screamed. A juice box exploded on my rug. I stood frozen, watching the chaos swirl around me. You should have asked, I said finally. This is still my home. Blake snorted. You don't have kids, Sienna. How would you understand what it's like? That hit harder than I expected. I looked at Mom, hoping, maybe, she'd speak up. She did. You don't have to be so selfish. That word, selfish, came out like venom. I blinked. Selfish? For wanting to sleep in my own bed? For needing space to work? For not being a team player, she added, cutting a slice of cake with my favorite paring knife. This is what family does. I didn't speak. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I didn't know whether I'd cry or rage. They went on eating. Blake, Mom, the kids, even Dad, quietly chewing near the window. A single balloon drifted down and brushed my shoulder. I didn't move. I watched them eat the birthday cake in my living room. And I wondered, if this is a family, who am I in it? I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Blake said, once the lease is up, she'll probably move out. She won't kick us out. She's too soft. The refrigerator light bathed the kitchen in a pale blue glow as I reached for a glass of water, barefoot, half awake. The house was supposed to be quiet, the kind of silence only 3 sleeping children could offer. But I heard murmurs. Low, confident. She'll probably move out, Blake was saying, a smirk in his voice. She's too soft. Always has been. I froze by the hallway, glass in hand. She's not going to say anything. Mom replied smoothly. We've managed just fine this long. And once the kids start school, it'll be harder to uproot. Just stay. I'll deal with her. Something in my stomach dropped, like cold water spreading under the skin. The hallway carpet, once warm under my feet, felt foreign, hostile. They weren't just waiting out hard times. They were planting roots. In my home. Back in the darkness of the living room, I sat on the armrest of the couch and let their words settle. Not as an attack, but as confirmation. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't selfish. I was being erased, one small decision at a time. My phone vibrated beside me. Alex. Heard from Erin. Are you okay? Still working 80 hours while playing nanny? Alex Harper, an old classmate from law school, now with a boutique firm downtown. We hadn't spoken much since graduation, but she always had a sharp way of cutting through noise. Me. I need a sanity check. Can I call tomorrow? Alex. Coffee. My treat. Noon. Bring documents. I stared at the message, then at the hallway where the light had gone out. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to dream. I just wanted silence. Real silence. The next day, Erin called. I hadn't planned to tell her everything, but exhaustion peeled my restraint away. They're not leaving, I said. They never planned to. A pause. I didn't know you'd say that, she whispered. I guess I thought it would be like always. You'd give in, and eventually things would just fix themselves. I said nothing. Do you want me to talk to Mom? She offered. No, I said. Just listen. That's enough. At the cafe, Alex arrived in a navy pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, a contrast to my wrinkled blouse and tired eyes. She took one look at me and sighed. They're squatting in your condo? Technically, I said. Family squatters. Not for long, she said, flipping through my documents. Deeds clean. You're sole owner. No cosign, no shared mortgage. They have no legal claim. I nodded. That part I'd known. But hearing it aloud felt heavy, like a verdict. So, she continued, lowering her voice, you could kick them out. Legally, I mean. I could, I said. But I won't. Alex narrowed her eyes. You planning something? I'm selling, I said, watching her expression shift. Quietly. No warnings, no fighting. Just gone. A pause. Then she smiled. The slow, impressed kind. That's cold. No, I corrected. It's clean. That evening, back in the condo, Blake asked if I'd mind picking up groceries. Mom made passive-aggressive comments about the cost of diapers these days. I smiled, nodded, and walked into my room. Not the one they'd taken, but the tiny office with the futon where I now slept. I pulled out my laptop and opened a browser. Chicago real estate agents' discreet seller support. The first link promised fast closings, minimal foot traffic, and privacy. Perfect. And I started looking for a real estate agent. The first thing I said was, I don't want the neighbors to know until the last minute. Blake laughed when I told him someone might come by to look at the condo. Nice joke, sis. This place is basically ours now. The smell of burnt barbecue sauce clung to the curtains. My once elegant living room was filled with paper plates, crumpled napkins, and the echo of someone's playlist. Country music, not even the good kind. Blake had commandeered the balcony with a grill he borrowed from the neighbor upstairs, and I watched as he sipped my wine, one foot resting casually on my coffee table like it had always belonged to him. When I casually mentioned, someone might stop by this week to look at the space, he barked out a laugh without turning. Nice joke, sis. This place is basically ours now. Susan nodded without missing a beat. Maybe Blake should officially be put on the deed. It's not like you use this place much anymore. I looked up from my laptop. I work here. I live here. But emotionally, you've always been so detached, she added, like that somehow justified erasing me. You've never been a homebody. I smiled. A tiny, unbothered curl of the lips. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. It was easier to let them believe they were winning. Later that afternoon, I stepped out to meet Alex at the cafe down the block. Jasmine joined us a few minutes later. Sharp blazer, practical heels, and a voice that carried authority even in whispers. She placed the paperwork on the table between us, each form pristine, each line a nail in the quiet coffin I was building for the life they thought they owned. Once you sign these, Jasmine said, we can officially list. You'll retain full control of access, appointments, timing. It'll be discreet. No signage, no public listings, I clarified. Only private showings. By referral. She nodded. Alex reviewed each document before sliding them toward me. Are you sure you don't want to give them a warning? She asked, not out of hesitation, but just to confirm. Why would I said. They're already convinced it's theirs. Let them keep thinking that. The pen was heavier than I expected, but it moved smoothly across the paper. My name, signed with purpose. The moment I dotted the last line, something inside me clicked. Like a vault, finally shut. Back at the condo, Blake had left a grease-streaked pan soaking in my sink. One of the kids had used my designer throw pillows as a napkin. Susan was folding laundry on my couch, humming as if she were the rightful lady of the house. Did you get a chance to think about the deed? She asked without looking up. It'd just be easier for future planning if you added Blake. It's not fair you hold it all when you barely use it. I stirred my tea calmly. I'll think about it. She seemed pleased with that, and I let her be. That evening, Jasmine texted. Jasmine, first private viewing tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll pose as your friend just stopping by. No pressure, just a test run. Me. Perfect. I want to see how they'll react. Before bed, I opened the fridge and stuck a note front and center with a small magnet shaped like a pineapple. Black marker, block letters. Please tidy up tomorrow. We may have a visitor. I stepped back, tilted my head, and smiled. They thought I was too soft, too quiet, too polite. Let's see how they handle silence when it's finally theirs. When they saw the sold sign on the balcony, Blake stormed in like a hurricane, but I was already halfway to O'Hare. I didn't stay for the drama. I didn't need to see their faces. That was the beauty of it. For once, I didn't have to witness the destruction to believe in its finality. I left the condo before dawn, a single suitcase in hand and an envelope on the dining table, right beside the half-eaten box of cereal that had been sitting out for days. The envelope was thick, sealed, deliberate. Inside, a copy of the condo sale contract, signed, witnessed, final. Beneath it, my handwriting in calm, unshakable ink. I gave you space. Now I'm taking back mine. That was it. No long explanations, no apologies, no more soft detours. By the time the sun climbed over the lake and painted the windows gold, Jasmine had posted the sold sign on the balcony railing. Tasteful, no neon, but unmistakable. The building security would inform them later that day. They had 10 days to vacate. The legal window was short, tight, airtight. Alex made sure of that. Jasmine handled the paperwork with surgical precision. No loopholes, no chance to stall. At Terminal 5, I sat by the glass watching planes drift in and out like breathing. I turned off my phone after the 5th call from Blake, didn't even listen to the voicemail. I could imagine him yelling, gesturing wildly, asking Susan what the hell had just happened, wondering how it all moved without them noticing. Because that's the trick. People like them never notice until it's too late. They feed on presence, on your staying. The moment you vanish, they starve. My flight wasn't until the afternoon, so I had one last meeting. The park bench was shaded and quiet. The air smelled like summer, cut grass, faint barbecue, and honeysuckle from the bushes nearby. Erin arrived late, jogged up in a loose hoodie and jeans, her expression tight. I came as fast as I could, she said. I handed her the spare key. She stared at it, unsure whether to take it. They'll ask, I said. They'll expect you to pick up where I left off. Erin's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just finally grown back into my skin. You don't owe them, I added, softer now. And you don't have to let them shrink you to fit their mold. Her fingers closed around the key. What will you do now? She asked. Anything, I said. Everything. Her eyes welled. You really did it. I really did. She exhaled, then hugged me like we were little again, the kind of hug that said, please don't disappear. But this wasn't disappearing. It was reappearing, just not in the frame they'd chosen for me. As I boarded the plane, my phone buzzed once more. Mom. The last message came through just as I hit airplane mode. Please, Sienna, we can talk. Don't do this. This isn't you. She was wrong. This was finally me. I turned the screen off and slipped it into the seat pocket. For the first time, I'm sitting on a plane and I don't feel like I'm running away. I'm just walking toward myself. Mom opened the envelope with trembling hands. Erin stood beside her. For once, she didn't say a word. The living room was colder than usual. Maybe it was the silence or the way no one reached for the remote. The birthday balloons were long gone. The noise, the kids, the arrogance. All of it had vanished like a bad dream that lasted too long. Now, only the 4 of them remained. Susan clutched the envelope like it might burst into flames. Blake leaned against the armrest, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line so tight it looked painful. Dad sat near the window, not moving, not blinking, just breathing as if every breath hurt. Erin didn't speak. She only handed Mom the envelope, then stepped back, arms at her sides. Susan peeled it open, slow. Inside, a folded piece of paper, a photograph, and a printed copy of the sale contract. Her hands hovered over each item, not knowing which to look at first. The letter was handwritten. The loops in Sienna's cursive were as even and gentle as ever. Only this time, there was no apology between the lines. You took what was mine, so I took it back, not to hurt you, but to heal me. Sienna Susan read it aloud, voice cracking. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was final. Like something had closed for good. Then came the photo. Sienna, barefoot, standing by a cliff overlooking the sea. The wind caught her hair mid-laugh, and her smile was the kind you never saw at the dinner table. Not once. Blake's jaw twitched. She's selfish, he said. After everything we did for her? Erin turned her head slowly. She just finally stopped apologizing. He looked at her like she'd betrayed them too. Dad let out a breath. Not angry, not sad, just spent. She was always the quiet one. He muttered, almost to himself. Maybe we thought that meant she'd never leave. Susan dropped the letter. It drifted onto the coffee table like a feather. Without a word, she stood up and walked out of the room. Blake didn't follow. The room stayed still. Erin remained in her spot, eyes fixed on the photo, fingers brushing over the edge as if she could feel the salt breeze through it. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just saw. Years later, when I walk into my own apartment, I still think of her. And I know she finally found peace. And I will too. They didn't notice when I stopped setting the table for 5. Or when I stopped staying in the room during their endless conversations about what was best for the family. I began vanishing in plain sight, and somehow that made them feel more entitled. The less I resisted, the more space they took. Until one day, there was none left for me. I had believed for too long that love was endurance, that loyalty meant sacrificing my own boundaries for the sake of unity, that saying yes meant I was strong, but strength doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes it looks like walking away. The night I left the envelope on the table, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the tears had already done their job. They had softened me when I needed to feel. Now, I needed to act. Quietly. Precisely. Without asking for permission. I had spent weeks pretending. Pretending I didn't hear Blake bragging about how I'd never kicked them out. Pretending I didn't see Mom treating the condo like some extension of her will. Pretending it was just temporary. But the truth is, they were never planning to leave. Not on their own. So I left first. I didn't yell. I didn't slam any doors. I just closed the sale, signed the documents, booked the ticket, left the key with Erin, and whispered the only thing I wished someone had told me years ago. Don't lose yourself trying to be good for people who will never see you. The look in her eyes told me she understood. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to start asking her own questions. That was more than I ever got. When I turned off my phone at the airport, I didn't feel guilt. I felt space. I felt air in my lungs that didn't carry the weight of compromise. I wasn't escaping. I was arriving. At myself. For years, I believed I was just the spare room in their house of priorities. Always available. Never considered. But I was the architect all along. I just forgot I had the right to draw my own boundaries. I know they'll paint me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the selfish sister, the one who abandoned them. That's fine. Let them. I didn't leave to be understood. I left to stop being erased. And as for what they found in that envelope, just the truth. A letter, a photo, a closed chapter. Some people say justice is loud, that it arrives with fanfare, courtrooms, or confrontation. But sometimes justice slips in through the back door, signs the papers, and leaves the ones who took too much staring at a space that no longer belongs to them. Sienna didn't need revenge. She needed release. And in reclaiming her space, she reclaimed herself. When injustice is met with unwavering resolve, even the softest voice can echo louder than a lifetime of commands. Let this be a reminder. No one gets to occupy your life by default. Not even those who call it family. If you're still here, thank you. Not just for watching, but for holding space for stories like Sienna's. Stories that don't scream, but still deserve to be heard. Maybe you've been called too sensitive, ungrateful. Maybe you've learned how to fold yourself small just to keep the peace. And maybe, just maybe, you're tired of making yourself disappear for people who never saw you to begin with. If that's you, this story wasn't just a story. It was a mirror. And I hope even for a moment you saw your reflection. Clear, strong, unbent. Because your boundaries are not betrayals. Your silence is not consent. And your space, whether it's a home, a voice, or a future, is yours to claim. To everyone who liked, commented, or simply stayed until the end, thank you. This channel doesn't just tell stories. It builds a home for those who were told they didn't belong. So if this meant something to you, subscribe and come back next week. We're not just here to listen. We're here to remember. Soft does not mean weak. Quiet does not mean small. And leaving is not the same as giving up. Until next time, protect your peace. And never apologize for reclaiming your place in the world.